So Nick, resilience is a very popular topic for leaders nowadays. So the question is being one of our experts on resilience, well, how did you get interested in the topic?
Yeah, probably, I think it was 10 years ago, I met this guy, and he was Dr. Derek Roger. He was one of the leading researchers in the world on stress and resilience in workplace. He came out to New Zealand, and I got to know him. He sort of became my mentor, actually. And I just found his research was amazing because it was the opposite of what everyone else was saying around stress.
So if you can talk a little bit, what are the big ideas?
Well, the first thing is he was very interested in why is it that when you go into a workplace you've got two people sitting beside each other, they both got, the usual way is I've got a stressful boss or I've got a stressful job or it's a stressful atmosphere. But he would see that there's two people, they've got the same job, they've got the same boss, they've got the same experience, and yet one person is stressed and one person's fine. And so he wanted to know, what is it that's different between those two people? What's going on differently?
So I'm curious. So what is the difference feeling like I have a stressful job?
Sure, yeah. So the first thing he worked out is there's a difference between pressure and stress. So pressure is demand in the external environment. And so all of us have pressure in our jobs. But stress is what people do inside their heads with that pressure. And it really comes down to one big factor. So he's done 30 years of research on this, and it comes down to one big factor, and that factor is called rumination.
Okay, so
what's rumination?
What is rumination?
So rumination is thinking over and over about events which are coming up in the future or have happened in the past and attaching negative emotion to them. So it's and so what people who tend to be stressed a lot is they ruminate over and over and over about things which aren't happening. People who are in highly pressured environments but don't ruminate aren't stressed.
So if I have a meeting that I'm looking forward to and I'm thinking and worrying a lot about this meeting, my performance, is that part of rumination or is it different?
Yeah, it is. If you attach negative feelings and emotions to it, it is. If it's worry, then what happens is adrenaline flushes through your system, cortisol flushes through your system, there's a whole lot of different physiological impacts. If you're thinking about it, but there's no anxiety or there's no worry about it, that's not stress. We would call that reflection. So you might be reflecting about something from the past and learning some lessons from it, or planning for the future. If none of us planned, neither of us would be sitting here today. So planning's okay, but rumination is different.
Okay, so first of all, how do you know you're a ruminator, and then what do you do about rumination?
Sure. Well, the first key idea, and this is actually a really big idea, I think, it has been in my life, is what he points out is that most people are asleep most of the time. And he doesn't mean, this isn't about when you're in bed, it's when you're at work, when you're driving your car, when you're doing these different things. So for example, imagine you're driving your car, you leave one part of town, and then 30 minutes later you arrive at a completely different part of town and you can't remember anything which happens.
Like this morning for me driving to work.
Right. Precisely, yeah. So a lot of people have that going from work. And the question is, where were you? And what he found is that most people are in this state called waking sleep. So usually when we think about sleep, we think wide awake and we think asleep, like a light switch. But in actual fact, when you measure people's brain activity, they go through stages of sleep, from wide awake to deep sleep, and then the next one's REM sleep, where you dream. The next one's sleepwalking, and then that very highest one is wide awake, when you're completely present. But the stage in between is called waking sleep. And that's when you are off in your head, your attention's been snatched away, and you are ruminating on things which aren't actually happening. And so when I speak to Derek, he estimates people spend up to 70% of their time in this waking sleep state. And that's when rumination happens. So, to your question, what do you do about it? There's 4 steps, and the first step is to wake up.
Okay, that sounds easier said than done, right? So how do you wake up?
So what you need to do is connect to your senses and get into the present. So anytime you are connected with your senses, so even right now, if you felt what is the feel of the soles of your feet on the floor? If you feel, what is the temperature of the air on your skin? If you listen to the sounds that you can hear right now, anytime you're connecting with your senses, it brings you back into the future, into the present. And when you're in the present or in the now, there's no rumination going on and you cannot be stressed. Right, so step one is to do that, and it's really to wake up and stay awake for as long as you can. As you start to do this, you're going to realize, I can't do it for very long. And that's, the experience we all have. It lasts for about, most people, what you're going to find, once you start doing this practice, you'll notice after about 15 seconds, you're back into this waking sleep, and you are going in and out of it all day long. And the wake up for most people is they've never even noticed they're doing it.
Interesting. So it's 4 steps, right? So what are the other steps involved?
So the second step is to control your attention. So part of going into that waking sleep constantly is we wake up, but then we lose control of our attention. It gets snatched away. And where it gets snatched away by is our thoughts. So a thought pops into our head, it's sort of interesting or it's scary, and so our attention gets pulled in, and all of a sudden, rather than putting our attention out into the world and being present, it's going round and round and round, and 5 minutes later you are still ruminating about this meeting which is coming up, and you end up losing most of your life in a rumination. So second step is wake up and then control your attention, consciously direct it to where it's most needed.
Okay.
Okay, so the third one is to detach. So part of the reason we keep going back and ruminating again and again is we get hooked on these things. So think about things which you are likely to get hooked on. And you don't have to tell me.
No, okay, I have a few of them.
Yeah, a few. And they're the things which keep hooking us again and again. And we get attached to them. So step 3 is to detach from it. And the way to do this is just to observe your thoughts. So as they come, let them come and let them go, and let them come and let them go. And as you start to do this more and more, you start to get some distance on them. So it becomes more like you have these thoughts don't have you. And what it does is it brings the thoughts and the emotions into perspective, and they still pop up, but then they just drift past. You almost want to imagine you're up in a loft, these thoughts coming past like a river below you, and you just watch them as they come past.
What about thoughts that you're like, oh, this is a really great idea, or this is brilliant, or at least I think is brilliant. You don't want to throw those away, right?
No, you don't. So, but when you are controlling your attention, you choose what you pay attention to. The problem for most of us is we don't choose. We're completely unconscious. A thought comes up, we get attached to it, and away we go, and 15 minutes later, we haven't achieved anything. So the key, but you can only make those conscious choices when you are awake and present.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so what's the last step then?
The last step is to let go. So a lot of the stuff we've been ruminating about, it's gone on for a long time in our mind, and the reason we keep coming back to it is we won't let it go. And it's interesting actually when you do observe what am I most likely to ruminate on, you start to, why do I always do this? You start to see you don't want to let go of it. So the last step is to let go, and it's sort of best illustrated by a story.
Okay.
And the question is, around how do you catch monkeys in the jungle, right?
Okay, wasn't thinking about that.
And so the way you do it, and this is the way they do it in Africa, you put a peanut out, you put a cage over the top of it, and with the cage you want a hole which is just small enough for a monkey to get its hand through, but too small that once it grasps onto it and makes a fist, it can't get it out because the fist is too big. And once it does that, you run up behind the monkey, you grab it and you pick it up, and you've got the monkey.
The monkey.
And you've taken the whole monkey's life. And the thing is, if the monkey had looked around the forest, it would have seen that the forest is full of food. And it gave up its whole life for a peanut, right? And with our ruminations, that's what we do as well. We end up ruminating on and on about this stuff, which is just peanuts. And what we really need to learn to do is just let go of these experience.
So summarize for me quickly, what are the big ideas about resilience and, letting go of this stuff as leaders?
Yeah, I think the main idea is we're all going to find ourselves in pressured situations. There's going to be change. There's going to be a lot of different events. But stress is not inevitable because you will have the same people in the same situations. Some are stressed and some aren't. The ones who aren't, they're spending more time awake in the present. They're not blowing things out of proportion in their mind and ruminating on and on about them. And they just quickly let go of stuff. Stuff happens, stuff comes, they keep it in perspective, they let it go. The ones who aren't are the ones who are blowing things out of perspective and falling into this waking sleep and ruminating over and over. And we all recognise people like that. And the final key point is any of this is changeable. It takes practice. I remember when I first learnt this, one of the reasons he became my mentor was because I did ruminate a lot. And since that time, I went from being high on rumination to extremely low. Any of this is changeable. It does take practice, but it's well worth it. It actually changes the way you live once you start getting into this.
Well, thanks for sharing a little bit for us on resilience. And I will tell you, I will never forget that monkey story you just told me.
Good.